Okay, let's make a start. So welcome to this webinar this afternoon. My name is Dr. Sarah Rose. I am a senior lecturer in psychology and child development. I'm also the course leader for our undergraduate degree in psychology and child development at Staffordshire University. But I'm also mum to a 4-year-old and a 6-year-old, and I know that parenting is hard. So what I was hoping to be able to do this afternoon is to give you some tips about how to maybe cope, how to maybe think about the choices that you make as a parent during this time of a pandemic. Now, I would like to invite you to ask questions. If you could save those questions until the end of the webinar, though, or you could ask them as you go through, but I won't be able to answer them until the end of the webinar. Okay, so I'm going to be talking about positive parenting. I'm going to try and give you 6 tips. These tips are based very much on psychology evidence, so psychology theory and research. And I've chosen these tips because I hope that you might find them useful. They won't make parenting any easier. I certainly can't claim that. But what I hope is that maybe they'll make you feel a little bit more confident about some of the decisions that you make as a parent, particularly at the moment when things are quite tricky. You know, we've been at home with our children for quite some time. Yes, it looks like things may be changing again and some of the lockdown may be being relaxed, but that doesn't necessarily mean that things are going to get easier. We're going to be thinking about our children potentially going back to school. We're going to be thinking about ourselves potentially going back to work. So what can we do at these times? Well, showing connection is really important. So this is my first tip. We know from lots of psychology evidence that secure attachment in children is really important. How do we develop and foster that secure attachment? Well, one absolutely key way is about being responsive to their needs, showing them affection, showing them connection. For young children, we know that just physical affection, touch, can help reduce stress levels in our children and also in us as parents. Now, older children might not want to sit and have cuddles with you, but trying to find other ways that we can connect with our older children is also important. It might be that we share time together, maybe outside, taking part in exercise. There's lots of evidence again that exercise, particularly time spent outside in green spaces, can help reduce stress levels. We've got the Centre for Health and Development at Staffordshire University, and they've been involved in this research that shows that green space exercise, time spent in green spaces, is really important for us. So maybe trying to make some quality time as a family to spend together outside can help develop these feelings of secure connection with our children. But of course, parenting isn't just always about being supportive and loving. It's about trying to be a balanced parent and remembering that you are the parent. So another kind of key theory within developmental psychology is a theory about parenting styles, and the idea that within each of us, within each parent, we have supportive aspects, and we also have demands that we place on our children, expectations about how they would behave and things. And again, kind of the psychology evidence suggests that being an authoritative parent is the best type of parent to try to be. Now, I certainly don't manage this all the time, but an authoritative parent is a parent which has that mutual respect for their child. They respect their child, but they also expect their child to respect them. So it's about being loving and supportive, but it's also about placing demands on your children, having expectations about how they will behave. So thinking about, you know, how this might actually kind of play out. It's about telling them what you expect. It's about communicating with them, but also listening to them. So it's not just a one way, telling them what you'd like them to do, but also listening to them and about what they would like to do with their time and the way that they're spending their time. Being an authoritative parent also requires us to control our own emotions. And that can be really difficult sometimes because, as I've already said, parenting isn't easy. So part of being a good parent, and this is my third tip, is about managing our anger, both our own anger and also helping our children to manage their anger, and potentially, if we've got more than one child at home, managing anger between children. Now, this could be something that's particularly tricky at the moment in the time of the pandemic, because we're spending often more time together, so we haven't got that break away from each other. Also, we may be feeling stressed. We may be feeling stressed as parents. We may be stressed about, now we're on furlough, how's it going to be? Am I going to have a job at the end of this? We may be stressed because we're thinking, oh, I've got to make sure that I do my job and I do this to keep my employer happy. But I also need to entertain, look after my children. And then the school sending through all these things that I should be doing with my children and expectations of them doing schoolwork, and how should I be supporting them with that? Or you might be a key worker. You might be working extra hours. You might be worrying about potentially bringing the infection home to your family, you know, that risk to yourself and to your family. And you might be dropping your children off at school or at nursery, but it won't be school or nursery as they knew it. Everything will be very different, and this can create stress. So it's important to recognise that anger in ourselves and in our children is just a symptom. It's a symptom maybe of feeling stressed, or it might be a symptom of the environment, the situation that we find ourselves in. So in terms of your own anger, you know, we all will feel resent at some point. We all will think, just be quiet a minute, children, I need to get some work done. Think about just noticing that. Don't be cross with yourself for maybe feeling resentful or angry. Acknowledge the feeling and think about how you can maybe engage in a little bit of self-care, how you can maybe help yourself to feel better. Is it that actually tonight, rather than turning the computer back on and trying to do some work when the children go to bed, you actually just need to have some time for yourself, have an early night, catch up on some sleep? Is it that actually you just need to go and run around the garden yourself maybe for a minute, and just, you know, release your anger in another way? In terms of children, it's very much the same. It's recognising that when our children are feeling angry, it's not because they're necessarily being naughty. It's a symptom, it's an expression of how they're feeling, of the situation that they're in. So again, it can be useful to try and help your child recognise the fact that they're feeling angry and try and help them to maybe think about how to deal with that a little bit more proactively. So maybe now is a good time to go and have a run around the garden, children. Or if it isn't possible to have a run around the garden, you know, thinking about other things that you might be able to do. Maybe actually now it's time for you to go and play in your bedroom for a few moments. Come back when you're feeling better. You know, depending on the age of the child, now it's time just to go and do something else, to have that distance, that little bit breakaway. You know, there was a time a few years ago, wasn't there, when sort of Super Nanny and Time Out was really popular and being promoted. And the recent evidence is that actually Time Out, per se, making people sit on naughty steps and things, isn't really that beneficial. But time away, just to calm down, can be really beneficial, both for a child and also for a parent. And then we have those issues of sibling conflict. Sibling conflict, anger between children, can be beneficial, but can also be quite wearing and could potentially have risks if children do genuinely hurt or upset each other. So remembering that some sibling conflict is normal and is part of social development, and we should let some sibling conflict occur. But again, if you feel that sibling conflict is getting too much, to intervene and to again try and encourage and model to your children ways that it is appropriate to deal with anger. It is hard though, definitely. One thing that can help with that is to try and develop routines. So I'm not suggesting that we need really fixed routines, but I'm suggesting that actually having kind of a pattern to the day can be useful. If you think of our lives pre-pandemic, we probably all had routines. Those routines were maybe structures that were imposed on us by school, structures imposed on us by our work schedules, etc. And those have all been turned on their head, turned upside down during this time of the pandemic. And actually bringing some routine back into our lives can be extremely reassuring for us and also for our children. And this routine doesn't need to be strict. Maybe this routine is just about things like, before lunch, I need to spend some time doing my work, and children, you need to spend some time doing schoolwork, or you need to spend some time doing something quiet where maybe you haven't got my attention. But after lunch, we're going to go outside together as a family and do some activity, some exercise. It's got to be what works for your family. And of course, there's got to be spontaneity. Sometimes it's a lovely sunny day and today we just need to do this. And there's still got to be flexibility within that routine. So many of you might, like me, be struggling a little bit with that kind of homeschooling element, and that knowledge that, you know, it's not really about what we do, it's about making sure that we do something. It's about trying to make sure that our children are still motivated to learn, that it doesn't become a battle. And in that respect, again, if we look at psychology, there's theories there about how do we motivate people. And actually, things like autonomy are really important. So giving people some choice, giving our children some choice. They're going, right, okay, it's time to do some English now. Shall we do this or shall we do that today? Trying to give them maybe ownership. Also trying to think about, you know, the school may be sending home things that it's suggesting that you can do with your children. But actually, if your child has particular interests, this could be an opportunity to maybe go a little bit off curriculum and encourage them to develop those interests. So in my house today, we did some farm maths because my 6-year-old loves things to do with farms, but he really didn't feel like doing maths. So we did some calculations based on how many cows you have and how much you might sell them for at market. So use your child's interests. Try and think about, you know, helping them with older children, you know, encourage them maybe to do some topic work and research things on the internet that they might be interested in. Other things that are really important for motivation is making sure that the things that we're asking our children to do are things that are within their capabilities. If they perceive the tasks as too difficult, they're not going to be motivated to do them. They need to have that feeling of, I've got the competence to do this, as well as this being something that will develop my skills. Now, we also know that feeling a connection, feeling some kind of relatedness is very important to motivation. And this can be difficult because there's so many demands on your time as parents at the moment. But thinking about, you know, taking an interest in what your child is doing, asking them questions about it. By showing that interest, it will help to foster and develop that motivation within them, which hopefully will make that aspect of supporting their learning be a little bit easier. And absolutely key with routine, remember that fun is really important, and remember that lots of things that are fun also have learning involved in them. So maybe actually playing hangman as a family is something that everybody could enjoy, but it's got learning in for young children, learning in for older children if you make it more difficult and trickier words to spell, etc. So fun is really important at the moment. Fun helps reduce stress levels. If we find ourselves laughing, that helps to reduce stress levels. So yes, have routine, but have spontaneity, have flexibility, and above all else, try and make sure that, you know, the days do have something fun in them at the moment, although that may, of course, feel challenging. Okay, on to my fifth tip. So quite a lot often parents talk to me about their concern about the amount of time that their child might be spending in front of the screen. And this could be something that's an increased concern for many of us at the moment, as schools and other providers make more content available online and freely accessible, etc. Now, screen time can very much be part of a balanced daily routine. We shouldn't be afraid of letting our children spend some time in front of screens. We shouldn't feel guilty. Indeed, it might be something that helps us to create that balanced daily routine. It might be that actually allowing our children some time playing on apps on the iPad, or allowing them to watch a film, or letting them go on social media and talk to their friends might be something that enables us to have a bit of space to concentrate on maybe some work activity that we need to do. And it can help create that rhythm to the day again. There are, of course, guidelines within this. So there is quite a lot of evidence that screen time prior to bedtime isn't a great idea for adults as well as for children, actually. So there is evidence that that kind of hour before you go to bed is better if it can be relatively screen-free. And of course, there are lots of positive ways that screen time could be used, particularly at the moment. I've heard some lovely stories of children maintaining connection with extended family and friends over screen time. A friend, her son recently turned 12, and they had a 12th birthday party on Zoom for him, and it just sounded absolutely lovely. And I've heard other stories of families where grandparents have been able to engage with technology and have read bedtime stories and things over WhatsApp, or family members have helped children with schoolwork over WhatsApp and things like that, using, you know, the video calling, etc. And I think this is a lovely way where families can still come together in this time of upheaval, really, and support one another. And there's, again, psychology evidence there that's even for very young children, even for babies, seeing family members on screens can help keep that feeling of connectedness, that feeling of relatedness. So yeah, try and get Nana and Grandad on screen time if you can, because this may be beneficial, and it may also be helpful to you as parents. Of course, there's different quality of screen time when we think about, you know, educational apps, when we think about educational TV, non-educational TV, and there is evidence that children can learn from educational apps and educational TV, but they do learn best from interacting with other people. So try where possible to, yes, use those things, but maybe sharing some screen time with them so they get the biggest benefit from some of the educational apps and things. And of course, for those of you with older children, you might have particular concerns about online safety. You know, if your children are spending large amounts of time online and you're not able to always directly supervise that. We know from research done by people such as one of my colleagues at the university, Peter Macaulay, that parents are quite worried about the risks of being online. Now, we know with risky behaviour is always kind of a product of the parent's belief, the parent's behaviours, the child's behaviours, and the situation that the child's in. So it is really important as parents that we do acknowledge and talk to our children about the fact that there are risks to do with being online. And although some children are quite aware that there are risks, they're not always aware exactly of what those risks are and how to identify them and what to do if they do identify them. So again, it is difficult for us as parents because often it feels that technology is moving quite quickly. But really the thing that we can really do at the moment is make sure that we're talking to our children about what they're doing online, about the experiences they're having, etc. That we share maybe with them some of our concerns, so that they can then share their concerns with us, hopefully, as well. Okay, and that kind of leads me on to my final point, which is about building emotional resilience, or as my dad probably would have called it, kind of developing that thick skin. We know that the world is not always a lovely place, and we know that it affects people in different ways. Some children will be really excited to go back to school, others maybe really not excited and actually quite anxious about going back to school. So what can we do at this time to try and build emotional resilience? Well, many of the tips that I've already tried to give you will help build this emotional resilience. So showing that affection, that connection to your child is really important. That will help them to be emotionally resilient. Some people worry it will make them clingy. The evidence is to the contrary. Actually, being affectionate with your young child will help them to go into the world on their own, to feel more confident, to be stronger when you're not there as well. Try and really focus on praising the positives, noting the positives, talking to our children when things go well. We know that positive reinforcement, so praise, encourages good behaviour more than punishment discourages bad behaviour. So try and note what's going well and let your children know that you're noting that. Let your children know about the things maybe that you're worried about. Obviously think about how to communicate this in an age-appropriate way, but it's okay for children to know that they're worried, that other people are worried, but obviously we want to reassure them as well. We want to try and give them that reassurance that we are working hard to keep them safe, that other people are working hard to look after them and keep them safe. And we want to try and help their perspective shift beyond the present time. We want to try and help them maybe think about times in the past that they've found hard, how they overcame those times. We need to help them think about how in the future things will be different to how they are now. And that might be a good thing, or there might be other challenges. But whatever's happening, we will be there, other people will be there, working hard to help them feel safe. Now, sometimes it can be difficult to have these conversations, particularly maybe if you've got a sullen teenager who doesn't want to talk to you, but try and find the opportunities, try and find those opportunities where maybe the pressure is off a little bit. So maybe, you know, when you're outside exercising together, when you're driving in the car together, if that's going to happen again soon, when you're watching TV, there's some background noise on, try and begin the conversations then. Because these conversations are important, and the important thing is that you're having them and you remembering that it's about the positives, building on the positives, acknowledge the worry, but build on the positives. Children need to feel valued in the same way that it helps us as adults to feel valued as well. Okay. That brings us to the end of this webinar. Thank you so much. It's fantastic that so many people have been able to join. Please do look out for further events. We've got 2 events coming up next week that you can find about on our events page. One is about supporting business, and the other one is a talk a little bit more similar to this in terms of looking at film on demand and how that's altered during the pandemic. Okay, so yes, please do ask questions. I will do my best to answer some of them now, but I might not have time to answer them all because we don't want to keep everybody here for too long. I will, though, be answering the questions that I don't have time to answer on a Word document that will be circulated after this event. And please do feel free to get in touch with me personally. I'll put my email address on the slides if you've got any comments or questions that you'd like me to address after this webinar. Sometimes we need to reflect on things to come up with our questions, don't we? And I have written a short blog post that will be available shortly on our Insight blog, which is our blog page within the psychology department at Staffordshire University. The webinar will be recorded, or has been recorded as well, so please do feel free to share these sources of information with others. Okay, so I can see that there are already some questions being sent through, so thank you very much for those. Okay, so the first question is about tips for single parents. First thing I want to say with that is, if you're a single parent, I completely want to take my hat off and applaud you at the current time. It must be so difficult. And I think that, you know, it's that your normal support networks, you're just not able to access at the moment, and that must be hard. I think that all the tips that I've given apply very much to single parents, but maybe even more so. You know, try to have that quality time with your child. Try and show that affection. Try and make sure that you can kind of develop some routines, that you have time together with your children, but also, if possible, you have some time where you're not always together in the same room, even if that's just having to shut yourself away for a few moments and then go back to your childcare duties. Think about, you know, whether there's things that you can do in terms of those people who normally support you, maybe in terms of grandparents or family friends, and whether there's things that you can do when they're able to support you, maybe by reading a bedtime story on screen time while you go and have a quick shower or whatever. So, you know, depending on the age of your child, etc., try and think about looking after yourself, because that will help you to look after your child. Okay, so next question coming through. Time away from your child. Is it just going and doing something different, not necessarily giving in to your children and changing what you're doing? Absolutely. I think thinking time is really important, and sometimes we need that thinking time before we make a decision about whatever it is our child might have asked us to do. And I know sometimes in two-parent households that can be slightly easier, because the child can ask you and say, hang on a minute, let me go and talk to dad about that. And that partly buys you the thinking time. And again, kind of coming back to the previous question about, you know, if you're a single parent, don't be afraid to say to your child, hang on, yes, we might be able to do that. Yes, you might be able to have some iPad time or whatever, but let me just think about it a moment. You know, it's okay to model to our children the skills that we want them to develop. We want them to have patience, we want them to be reflective, etc., and to make well-informed decisions. And to be that balanced parent, we do need to say no sometimes. Okay, so the next question coming through is about somebody with an 8-year-old who throws tantrums when he can't do something that he wants to do, or maybe when he has to do his schoolwork. I can identify with this one. We've had a couple of tantrums today in our house, and I think it's about recognizing that that tantrum isn't a child being naughty. That tantrum is a child that at that moment in time, and it very much is a moment in time, is feeling unhappy. They might be feeling unhappy because they're feeling that their needs aren't being met. They might be feeling unhappy because actually they're just really missing seeing Nana and Grandad. And I think it's important to recognise that a tantrum is an emotional outburst. It's not anybody's fault. It should be acknowledged. So, saying things like, I can see you're feeling really cross about this. Shall we go and do something else for a few moments? Can help, but sometimes that doesn't work and you just get, no, I don't want to do that. So sometimes it is a little bit more of a, right, okay, now we are going to go and do this. But try and make the thing that you say that you're going to do not the thing that the child is having a tantrum about. So not forcing them, going, well, we know we've got to do your reading work now. Saying, okay, we won't do your reading work now. We'll leave that till a bit later. We'll do it later today. Now we're going to go for a compulsory walk. I explained the idea of compulsory walks to my 6-year-old the other day when he was in a good mood. And the idea, that now we're just going to go outside and do something, and it's kind of not optional, can be helpful. But yeah, tantrums are never easy for the child or easy for the parent. Okay, so another question coming through, again about an 8-year-old, and this is about getting them to do schoolwork. She gets angry, she is very unmotivated. It is really difficult, isn't it? And I think it's about how you can maybe use their interests to try and motivate them to do those things. Also, when they're not having a tantrum, when you're having a nice time with them, when you're doing something else with them, maybe trying to ask them, why don't you want to do this? What is it you don't like about? Is there something we could do that would make it easier? Is there something we could do that would make it more fun? And I think it's about problem solving in many ways, and problem solving is hard, isn't it? But as parents, we're having to develop our problem solving skills. So the problem is, child doesn't want to do this. How can I present it in a different way? Or how can I say to them, well, we need to do it at some point today. When should we do it? Should we do it after lunch or before lunch? So you're giving them that autonomy, you're giving them some control, but you're also placing that expectation on them that it does have to be done. Okay, so another question coming through, this time from somebody with a 3-year-old and a 10-year-old, and both parents are trying to work from home, and they're wanting to say, how do we balance everyone's needs? It's really difficult, isn't it? We're a family of 4. We used to be quite an effective family of 4. 2 of us were working, one was at nursery, one was at school, and we all got a lot done in our days. It's not as easy to be as productive, as effective now. Hopefully, employers are being sympathetic and are understanding that parents are having to juggle a lot. And I think it is about trying to look at those daily routines. And when you've got children who are quite different in age, a 3-year-old and a 10-year-old, maybe it's looking at ways to try and meet their needs and your needs, but not try and do everything together. So I don't know whether it might work that at certain times, if one of you's working, the 10-year-old can be sat next to the person that's working, doing their schoolwork, and the 3-year-old might be with the other adult doing household chores. We're also having to spend time making sure we've got clean houses. I know I'm certainly spending lots more time cooking and producing meals than I used to. But actually, for a 3-year-old, engaging in activities such as that is really beneficial. It enables them to feel useful, valued member of the family. It enables them to gain skills that are going to be really valuable to them. Even language that we use in those interactions is, oh, can you pass me another one if you're setting the table? Oh, we need a bit more in there. Is developing their numeracy skills. Yes, the jobs probably will take slightly longer to get done with a 3-year-old, but maybe that's some kind of balance that you can try and use. And yes, then there will be times when screen time might be advantageous and might help everybody get done what they need to. Another question coming through. So someone who's worrying about their son returning to school. He's a 13-year-old and he's always worried about school a little bit. And they're worried obviously about this kind of transition and how they're going to get him back to school. And actually that kind of anxiety around school is quite a common childhood phenomena. Many children have school-related anxiety, and I think often we're aware of it with maybe younger children, but we think, oh, they'll grow out of it, and they don't always, and it is difficult. I think that my main advice here is about those things I was talking about with the last point, emotional resilience. So trying to do all that you can to build your son's emotional resilience, trying to talk to him in a non-pressured way, trying to talk to him about what to expect when he goes back to school, trying to talk to him about how other people will be looking out for him, caring for him, etc., and how you'll still be thinking of him when he's at school. You know, you could even share your worry that you're worried about how he's going to find it going back to school, and thinking, you know, about whether there's little things that you could do. You know, there's evidence that suggests that, you know, notes in lunchbox from parents, those sorts of things can help, even with older children. You know, text message during the day, checking how they're getting on, those sorts of things. Also, you know, if we can help children to still feel some connection to their school, even though they're currently not at school, and that to make that connection a healthy one. So if there is opportunity for them to have some kind of conversation with the teacher or their main teacher prior to going back, that can be beneficial. Thinking about, you know, whether there's a particular friend that they've got that they could meet up with online and talk to before they go back, and maybe, although they'll be having to keep 2 meters distant, sort of organising it so that those two people arrive at school at a similar time, so they've kind of got each other for emotional support, those sorts of things. You know, parenting is hard. It is just about trying to do the best job that we can, really. And the fact that, you know, you're asking these questions shows that you're wanting to do that. Okay, we are running out of time a little bit here. I don't know whether we have time maybe for just one more question. Lovely. Okay, so a question that's just come through about a child who's very anxious but is struggling to talk about his feelings. Absolutely, really good question, this one, because I've talked about the importance of talking to children, but sometimes it isn't easy, is it? And I think it's about how to try and talk to them in a very non-pressured, indirect way. It depends on the age of the child often. With younger children, sometimes they're not completely aware of what they're feeling anyway. And actually using things such as drawing pictures together. So you draw a picture, I'll draw a picture, and just while you're drawing, trying to have a conversation, maybe just about what's in the drawing to begin with, and kind of going from there. Trying to have conversations when you're not necessarily having to have sort of direct eye contact can be beneficial. So sitting sort of side by side, watching something that's not very interesting on television can be useful. Or, you know, when you're doing, I don't know, baking a cake together, something like that. There are some quite useful resources that various publishers have shared during this time as well. And again, these vary depending on the age of the child, but there's some books that have been written about anxiety, which can be really, really useful. I'll put some links to some of those books that come to my mind when I think about children and anxiety in the Word document that will be circulated after this webinar, with answer to some more of the questions I haven't got around to. And so do think about following those up. And some of these are books that are specifically kind of about anxiety to do with coronavirus, but some of them are to do with anxiety more generally. And I think they can be quite beneficial to helping children understand how they're feeling and recognize how they're feeling. And that actually once a child recognizes that, oh, this funny feeling in my tummy doesn't mean I'm about to be sick, this funny feeling in my tummy means that I'm feeling anxious, just recognizing that can become reassuring for the child. Okay, so I think we're a bit over time now, but thank you so much for joining us this afternoon, and thank you so much for the questions. I will be doing my best to answer some of the other questions and for those to be circulated in a Word document. And please do, you know, get in touch. One of my main motivations for wanting to do this webinar is that I wanted to try and think of something that I could do to help people at this time when it's tricky. And I thought, well, okay, what have I got? I've got psychology knowledge. I know what the evidence says. Doesn't mean I know what all the answers are, but hopefully I can maybe make some suggestions that are useful. So thank you ever so much. And I do hope that you're able to join one of our future events as well.